In 1910, over 24 million tonnes of coal were mined in the United Kingdom. The price? The death of 344 men and boys at the Pretoria Pit near Bolton, at the time Britain's second biggest mining disaster. On the 21st of December 1910, Christmas festivities were forgotten. It became known as Black Christmas. Nearly every household in the town of West Orton near Bolton was affected. Some households lost every male member: father, son, brother and uncle. This is the story of the Pretoria Pit disaster. Britain's greatness in the 19th century was based on a plentiful supply of coal. Many regions in Britain practically owed their entire existence to the presence of coal. One of these was the town of West Orton, just west of Bolton. Its population rose from 4,547 in 1851 to 12,900 in 1901. In 1921, over half the resident males were miners. The mining of coal has always exacted a heavy price in miners' lives. Technology has continually tried to catch up to the reality of mining.
It's technology chasing safety to make the mines safer, and they're safer now than they've ever been. But obviously in the early days they weren't very safe. I mean, at one bit, to get rid of gas, they used to have a bloke who used to douse himself in water with sacks over his back and crawl in with a lighted taper.
We will look at individual stories of tragedy and heroism. We will look at the evidence provided by the official inquiry and what effect, if any, the disaster had on the future of mining safety and legislation. First, we will look at the history of coal mining in Britain to put the Pretoria Pit into its historical context. Then we will look more specifically at the Pretoria disaster.
Coal was first extracted from outcrops, where coal seams ran very close to the surface. Adits or drifts were driven into the outcrops and small areas of coal would be worked out. These workings would eventually become flooded, or a build-up of gas known as fire damp, which was principally methane or CH4, would occur.
Well, fire damp is a gas that is inherent in the coal. Because it's vegetable, it's wood and vegetation that's rotted down and being compressed. The gas is allowed out of it when it's crushed and smashed.
When coal became more inaccessible near the surface, shallow shafts would be sunk, known as bell pits, because of their shape, from which the coal in a small radius of the shaft could be mined and then the shaft allowed to fall in.
They went from that to ladder pit. These were sunk to the depth of 70 to 120 feet. The usual cost of the shaft was 50 to 100 pounds. And these were men could go down ladders in this basis and get to the bottom and work the coal down below. This was better organised. Coal was got and packed into corves, which were baskets, circular baskets, placed on wooden sleds and dragged to the shaft's bottom. A horse gin was usually used to wind the coal to the surface. Again, no artificial ventilation was attempted.
With increasing demand for coal, particularly during the Industrial Revolution, shafts of greater depth were sunk, and one of the main problems with deep mining was flooding. The Newcomen atmospheric engine was introduced in 1712 to pump water from the workings. James Watt's steam engine, invented in 1769, enabled miners to work seams of greater depth, while steam power was applied not only to pumping water, but to winding, haulage and ventilation in the mines.
Where we're going now, we're going to pass three coal seams, right? The flopped and thin, flopped and thick, and old hard seam. The one we're going to, which is at a depth of 460 feet, it's called a new hard seam. This shaft was sunk to that level in 1876. It's probably one of the oldest working mining sites in Europe, this. At that time, the colliery was owned by a young lady, Emma Listerkay. She inherited the business from her father, John Listerkay. And so you're actually going to go back. We're passing points that have been mined over 200 years ago. But what they would do is sink the shaft to a level, work the coal seam as far as they could naturally with natural ventilation, come out of there and then sink the shaft deeper. But you get to a certain point where winding coal up and down shaft takes a certain length of time. Also, it's very expensive to sink shafts. So when we get to a certain level, we then drive roadways which slope down underground. We call them cross-measure drifts. You go down to coal seams further. So where we're going is the fourth coal seam that's being worked. There has been 3 below that what have been worked out as well.
As mining coal went further underground, the room and pillar system was adopted. Where surface support was needed, pillars of coal of the required size were left. Where no surface support was needed, pillars were wholly or partially extracted. It is also known as pillar and stall.
A pillar and stall system. At the front is a man, he's called a hewer. He's actually swinging a pick to dig coal out. What he does, picks that coal off that coal face and he pushes it, lifts it or shovels it into that wooden box. It's called a corve. He's the strongest member of the family team. He's working semi-naked, usually they would be naked as well. We would be at about the limit of natural ventilation. We don't have fans to ventilate pits at this stage, early 1800s. When he's put the coal in that wooden box, the corve, you get next strongest member of the family, be his wife or his daughter. The small teenagers, kids down to probably 6, 8 years old, their job's called a hurrier. The hurrier drags that box along this road where they would normally do it in the dark. Can't afford a candle, right? They've got to work 6 days a week, 12, 13 hours a day, just to survive, bare minimum, next door to starvation. Everything that they earn, they basically give back to the owner of the mine, because the candles that they use, the tools they use, the clothes they wear, the food they buy, the house they live in, all belong to the mine owners. They're actually next door to being slaves. And in fact, there are instances where people who were prosecuted for leaving one colliery and trying to get a job at another without asking if they could change jobs.
So you have a family. Then 1842, the Act took women and children under 10 out of mines. Well, that bloke then had lost 2/3 of his workforce and he'd have to pay.
And we've got the chap there, a young child, 5, 6 years old. Pull him out of bed on a morning at 4 o'clock, bring them to a place like this and leave them in the dark.
Yeah, on pillar and stall workings, and one at collieries that have been underground, they were pillar and stall workings, but they were under North Sea. In fact, they went 7 miles around North Sea, and if you could have, they worked pillar and stall, and if you could have taken the roof off them, you would look down and see it looked just like a draft board. A 10-yard pillar of coal left, a 10-yard taken out, 10-yard left, 10-yard taken out.
The room and pillar method of extracting coal was eventually superseded by the longwall method, and as its name implies, this consisted of working at a long face of the seam and extracting all the available coal.
At each coal face you have a coal seam. You've got to get supplies, men and ventilation up, so you have 2 roadways, one at either end of a coal face. As you take the coal out, the coal face advances, so you extend those roadways behind it. The distance between one roadway and the next, the length of the coal face, can be between 100 and 300 metres. When you've taken the coal out, you do not want a big open space behind you, because if you leave it supported, gas accumulates in there. Plus it short circuits the air. You need the air up to the coal face where the men are actually working. So we use a total caving system. We advance the supports constantly and we purposely let the roof collapse behind us. A total caving system. You need that void to be filled with the roof debris as it comes down.
Pretoria Pit used the long wall method, and by the time it was in production, 2 faces of one seam